Welcome to this Zoom presentation for the ROC-M radio course. The video is used in conjunction with the textbook and other materials I provide you for the ROC-M course. The actual exam is multiple choice, consisting of 60 multiple choice questions. And in addition thereto, there is a brief oral section for the exam. In that regard, what I do is I provide you with the possibility of 3 different scenarios, and you pick whether it's a distress, urgent, or safety call, and then you would tell me what channel you would make that call on, and then pretend to make the call. So I'd be looking for the relevant information. So as an example, on a distress call, most important thing is to get out your location and the nature of your distress. So I'd be looking for that. And then in addition to that, there are, you would have to spell a few words using the phonetic alphabet. That would be the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie alphabet. And so the information that follows here will help you prepare for your exam. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, anyone who operates a VHF radio or a medium frequency radio on the water must have a ROC-M license. The license is valid for the lifetime of the operator. And if you're Canadian, you need to have a Canadian ROC-M license, which is recognized in other countries. So if you are in Canada and go down to the US, your ROC will be recognized down there. Some some vessels require you to have a VHF or medium frequency radio. And I should say that this course primarily focuses on the VHF radio, since we tend to deal more with pleasure craft operators and not commercial vessels. So some vessels do, by law, require that they have a radio, and that's a list there. So before I get into this station license, for pleasure craft, a license for the radio is not required. However, if you do go to the States, you do require a license. So station license is required for the radio. The ROC is a license for the operator. So that's the distinction. So you can have a handheld radio, and you need to have an ROC-M to operate the radio. You do not need a license for the handheld radio, and you do not need a license for a station radio. But if you were to leave Canada and go into the US, as an example, then your ROC-M would cover you as an operator for both your station radio and your handheld. And your station radio would require a license. And when you apply for a license, you receive a call sign. So just to summarize again, as a pleasure craft, you do not need a station license. This is for your operator's license as an individual. But you do need a station license if you take your vessel outside of Canadian waters. The phonetic alphabet, the Alpha, Charlie, Bravo, is used for situations where communication is challenged or difficult. And you can use it to either for words or for numbers. And it's also used for things like dates, which we'll get into here. So here we have numbers. So 100 would be 100. If it has a decimal point, you would mention that it has a decimal. So here we have 2.95. And if you're trying to indicate what channel to go to. So here we have channel 16. It would be transmitted as channel 16. We use the 24-hour clock on the water. And so noon is 1200, midnight is either 2400 or 0000. Each digit is spoken separately. So the example there is 2400P is on the next page here. I have what that is. So P stands for Pacific Standard Time. And so you always have to be aware of whether you're in daylight saving time or standard time. Universal time. If you're going between time zones, then obviously it would be wise to follow the UTC time log. Nothing on the exam about this, but just for your own personal information. So is a question about this on your exam. So if you're recording dates, the first two digits are to record the day of the month, and the last four are to record the time of day. So you don't need to record what year it is. It's just simply the time and day of the month. So noon on the 20th day of the month would be 20, which reflects the 20th day of the month, and then 1200 indicating that it's at noon, and then P indicates that it's Pacific Standard Time. So when you obtain a station license, you also receive a call sign. So in this situation here, we have a vessel that's, the vessel name is Mar Dorkin, and the call sign is the CZR951. So what that indicates is that that ship has a call sign. Now, typically, what you hear on the water is vessels just using their vessel name. You don't actually hear the call signs that often. However, you are supposed to use your call sign if you have been assigned one. So the thing is that if you don't have a station license, you don't have a call sign. So what you do in a situation like that is you can use your vessel name, but some vessel names are quite common. So Tenacious actually is a fairly common vessel name, and so named after the Apollo program. So what you do in a situation like that is you'd say your vessel name followed by your vessel registration number. Now, again, that's best practices. What you tend to hear on the water is people just using the vessel name. And if there's confusion, then you could, fall back to using the vessel name along with the registration number. Okay, so now you're ready to make a call. So turn on your radio, select your channel, adjust your squelch. That would be like the hissing noise. So you want to turn it down so it's just slightly off. Adjust the volume, select the radio power. So most radios give you an option of, so as an example, with a VHF radio, you could transmit at 1 watt or at 25 watts. So, so it could give you options in between. But if you're in a harbor, where you're maybe trying to transmit a couple of blocks away, you don't want to be, drowning everybody out. So you adjust your radio to like 1 watt. So you select the power that's appropriate for your situation. Make sure nobody's on the channel that you wish to use, and then commence making your call. And it says here, a balanced calling is good practice. So what does balanced calling mean? It means, if I'm calling a vessel, I should say that vessel name 3 times. I should say my own vessel name 3 times. It's just like that. So if you're making make sure your channel is clear, then you press the key on your microphone to start transmitting. So a common mistake is that people will start talking before they've actually keyed their mic. And likewise, will release the mic key before they've actually finished their sentence. So they cut themselves off at the start and the end of their transmission. So, make sure you just give yourself a little bit of time to key the mic, start to talk, finish, and then unkey the mic. So you start off by saying your station's name. So you make the call, and then you give your station's name again, and then say over. Over means that you are expecting to have a response back. So you release after you transmit, you listen for a response. If you do not receive a response, then wait a few minutes and make a call again. So here's an example of a routine call. It's on channel 16, the hailing channel. So our vessel is Durley Dean. We're trying to call Tenacious. So we'd go Tenacious, Tenacious. This is Durley Dean, over. Then the Tenacious responding back to us, they'd say, Durley Dean, this is Tenacious, go to channel 71, over. So we've called our vessel is Tenacious, we've called Durley Dean has now responded back saying that they have received our call and are telling us to go to channel 71. Okay, and then I'm acknowledging that, so I'm going Tenacious, this is Durley Dean, Roger, 71 out. So now we've cleared channel 16. And on channel 71, because I called Tenacious becomes a controlling station. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So then it's Durley Dean, this is Tenacious, over. And then we begin our conversation off the hailing channel, channel 16. So controlling station, why do we have controlling stations? Well, because, in most situations, you cannot talk at the same time as you're trying to listen. So if I call another vessel and they respond back and we go to another channel, who calls who? And if we're both trying to call each other at the same time, we're walking over each other, we're not going to hear each other. And so that doesn't really work. So how it's been set up is practice is that if you call another vessel, then the vessel that I'm calling becomes the controlling station, so that as a controlling station, they decide what channel the conversation will move to. And then when we go to that channel, they then call me back. So I stay off the radio till I hear them calling me. So that's great. And it works well, except there's exceptions, and that is in a distress situation. So in a distress situation, the station that makes the distress call is the controlling station. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but in ship-to-ship calls, the station that is being called, not the station that's calling, but the station that is being called, becomes the controlling station. In ship-to-shore calls, the controlling station is the shore station. So that's a little one more exception. And then, as I said at the outset, distress calls, the controlling station is the vessel in distress, unless the Coast Guard assumes control. So we have differences between Canada and the US and international waters as to how the frequencies work. So when you buy a radio, and most will have this, but you want to make sure that they allow you to switch between Canada, US, and international waters. The channel numbers for VHF are the same, but the frequencies can be a little bit different. So example here is some channels like channel 16 and 70 are available in all modes, but channel 62A is available only in Canadian mode. I have CRIC 13. That is an index at the back of your textbook. It shows you all the channels used in Canada and the US and international waters. So it gives you an idea of what the differences are. None of that is on your exam, but it's good information to have. So simplex and duplex channels. Again, this is not on your exam, but it's good to know. So a simplex channel is a channel on which a radio signal is transmitted and received on the exact same frequency. So that means you cannot transmit and receive at the same time without the frequency becoming jammed. So simplex channels are suitable for ship-to-ship or ship-to-shore communications. But again, you have to make sure, this is why you use the word over to indicate that you finished your transmission so the other person doesn't key or walk over you. So duplex channels are different. So a duplex channel allows the user to transmit on one channel and to receive at the same time on another channel. It's like a telephone conversation. So an example of a duplex channel is channel 24. So a vessel on 24 transmits to an onshore station at a frequency of 157.2 megahertz and receives on a frequency of 161.8 megahertz. So the onshore station, which also, is on channel 24. So it's the same channel, but actually the frequency numbers are different. Receives at 157.2 and transmits on 161.8. So they're the exact opposite. So what that allows is, like I say, it allows same time communication. Both people can talk at the same time. Both people can hear each other at the same time. So the on-vessel radio and the onshore radio are opposite to each other. Therefore, because of that scenario, like say onshore and on water, they're different. So duplex channels are only suitable for ship-to-shore communications. So where would you have that? Well, you'd have that, say, with the Coast Guard. You'd have that maybe with tugboats operating in a harbor, communicating with, the harbor master. A couple of scenarios like that. So how do you know if you're on a duplex channel or not? Well, when the letter A appears after a channel, so like 22A, the A signifies that channel 22A is a duplex channel. There's nothing on your radio to switch, from A to not having the A. It's just simply 22A. Channel numbers followed by the letter B indicate that the channel is used for continuous marine broadcasts. So you do not have the ability to transmit on B channels. So an example of B channels are the WX channels, weather channels. So channels WX1 to WX7 are used by Environment Canada and by NOAA in the US to broadcast continuous weather forecasts. Next thing is radio check. So before you head out, you should make sure your radio is working. So you do not do radio checks on channel 16 because that channel is used for hailing people, not for doing radio checks. With increased boat traffic or radio traffic, you want to, there's a move towards trying to, keep channel 16 clear from unnecessary chat. So in Canada, what you do is you call the Coast Guard and ask for a radio check. So here's an example. on 22A, which that indicates it would be a duplex channel. So you go Vancouver Coast Guard, Vancouver Coast Guard. This is Serenity, Serenity. Requesting a radio check on channel 22, over. Then the Coast Guard would respond back and go, Serenity, this is Vancouver Coast Guard. You are a 5, out. So what does the 5 mean? So we have our readability scale. Now, again, what we try and teach is the best practices mode. In real life, I'll say, you don't really experience this. What typically happens is they don't give you a number. They'll just say good, or excellent, or fair, or not, can't hear you. It's more like that as opposed to a scale. However, if you do ask for a radio check and you're given a number, now you'll know what that number means. So this is actually taken from your textbook, and it talks about different C areas. So a little bit of clarification is needed here, because the book kind of, by this diagram, suggests one thing, and that is that C area 1 runs out to 20 nautical miles offshore, when it, in fact, C area 1 encompasses the area where, if you are in communication with a shore-based station, then you are in area 1. Now, it may be that you lose contact with a shore-based station when you're 15 nautical miles out, or maybe when you're 22 or 23 nautical miles out. Doesn't really matter. If you still have communication with a shore-based station, you are in area 1. Likewise, if you no longer have communication with a shore-based station and you're using a VHF radio, you are in area 2. So what impacts our range? Well, on a VHF radio and on a medium frequency radio, your signal goes straight out pretty much. It doesn't have a wave to it. It's a straight line. So what impacts us is the horizon. So how high is our antenna? What's in our way? And that impacts our range. So as an example, if you have a handheld radio, you'll find that your range is quite small, because your height of your antenna is very short. Whereas your station radio, if you have a sailboat and your antenna's on top of your mast, you'll have a longer range. Also, how much force is behind that signal also impacts your range. So again, a handheld radio maybe has 5 watts, and your station radio has 25 watts. So it's 5 times a greater push behind it. So that's one thing. This is not on your exam, but this is just sort of it's actually sort of a navigational thing, is like your sight to the horizon and determining distance. But a little formula you can use, your height, that gives you an idea of like how limited the range is. Or so like on both those situations, it looks like the rate to speak to the blue vessel to the yellow vessel, that range is about 16.38 nautical miles. Given the, I think we have a, not sure what I've got down there for height of antenna, but anyway, that's something you could, if you knew the height of your antenna, you take the square root of it, multiply by 1.17, and that's your distance to the horizon. And if you had a boat the same as yours, then you'd add that onto it, and that would give you your overall range with the two combined. So factors affecting range. Well, already kind of mentioned height of antenna, also kind of mentioned the radio power. But if you're trying to speak to somebody who's on the other side of an island or within a sound, so on the West Coast, I mean, people will say, that you can't transmit over, but you can transmit up and down a sound. So that's definitely an example there. High seas, so your antenna's on top of your mast or at a higher point on your boat. So every time your boat is rocking, your antenna is waving back and forth, so your signal's up and down, and foul weather. So what's impacting, the strength of your signal? Air inversions. Sometimes you can actually bounce the signal off an air inversion, so it gives you a longer range. So all the above factors impact your ability to transmit and receive VHF and medium frequency signals. There we have a landmass. So you can see how that would definitely impact the previous scenario we had, where we had open water before. Now we don't. So that would, hinder transmission and reception. There we have some waves, again, rocking back and forth, impacts transmission. Now we've got a storm. Now we've got an air inversion where, hey, maybe we're going to get an increased range because we can bounce the signal off. But, you don't want to be heading offshore hoping that you're going to be bouncing signals off air inversions. But, I mean, sometimes it does happen. And there we've got a mix of everything. So that's not a good situation for, strength of signal and distance for communication. Okay, next topic is priority of transmission. So that kind of lists the main ones there. And after all of those, then we get into like just standard or general communications. So, but the top three we're concerned about are the distress, urgent, and safety calls. So let's talk about distress calls. You only make a distress call when you are threatened by grave and imminent danger, life-threatening and immediate, and require immediate assistance, or when you see another vessel basically in that same situation. So another vessel that's in grave and imminent danger and that they require immediate assistance. So, like there's a law that says you're not supposed to make false distress calls. But what if you have somebody on board, who they're having a medical condition, you're not really sure what it is, and you make a mayday call. It turns out that maybe they just had some stomach cramps after something they ate. Are you in trouble? No, because you believe that you didn't know, you're not a physician, you didn't know what the scenario was. So to be rather safe than sorry, you made a mayday call when it probably should have been an urgent call. Are you in trouble? No, because your intent was that you believed it was a grave and imminent situation. So it's only if you knowingly make a false mayday call, that's when you're in trouble. So let's see. Or make a call. So if the vessel's equipped with a DSC radio, you activate the DSC alarm. And so to do that, there's usually a protective tab over the button that triggers the distress on a DSC. So you lift that, hold down the distress alarm button for 4 or 5 seconds. Most radios will count it down, beep, 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 and then, emit a solid tone. So again, it's very hard to make a false DSC distress alarm or an accidental one. So after that goes out, that's one part of it. However, not everybody has a DSC radio. So you can have a vessel very close to you and they not know you're in distress by your DSC signal alone. Therefore, you have to go to channel 16 and make a verbal call. So you would say Mayday 3 times. You'd give your vessel name 3 times. That's again the balance calling. After that, again, you'd say Mayday along with your vessel name. So again, you're really stressing that it's Mayday to try and get other traffic off the same channel. Then you would provide your location as accurately as possible. So I always tell students when I'm teaching sailing that, your latitude and longitude is very important, but also a geographic reference. A lot of pleasure boaters don't really, sadly, get latitude and longitude too much. They don't really even know where they are, especially with GPS and chart plotters. It's all set up for them. They don't really know what that means. So geographic location is good, or you have people who know what latitude and longitude means, but maybe the radio reception is not the best either because you are in a distress situation, and it's maybe hard to hear all the numbers for them to ascertain if they're close to you or not. So do both latitude and longitude, geographic location. Got to get that out first. If you have a limited amount of transmission time, at least if people know where you are, they can find you. Then nature of your distress. If it's medical, fire, vessel sinking, or something else, important for a Coast Guard or any other vessel who's going to offer assistance to know. If it's medical, then maybe you don't need a fireboat out there. You need medical personnel can come out by helicopter or so that's important to get the nature of your distress out. To provide a description of your vessel. So are you a sailboat? Or are you a commercial fishing boat? Or are you just a power pleasure boat? State the number of people on board. I mean, if they come out looking for you, they don't know how many people they should be looking to see, how many people do they need to search for, right? Any other relevant information, so like life jackets, a life raft. So if your boat's sinking and maybe by the time help gets there, the boat's totally gone under, and the Coast Guard or whomever would know to start looking for life jackets, signs of life jackets, people, obviously in life jackets, and life rafts or life raft. And then the name of the vessel, and then over. Now, should add in there that when you finish off, it would be wise to say, like if your vessel name is Tenacious, you go Mayday, Tenacious, over. So you have a Mayday at the end of your call, just so anybody tuning in midway will know at the end that it is a Mayday situation. I mean, they should know by your information, but you can't count on that, right? So if you throw the word Mayday in there at the end of your call, then it's clear it's a Mayday situation. Here's an example. So the vessel in distress is White Orchid. So Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is White Orchid, White Orchid, White Orchid, Mayday, White Orchid. Our position is 12 miles west of Grays Point. Latitude 49 degrees 12.23 minutes north, and 123 degrees 30.18 minutes west. So there we have like who we are and where we are. Then we have, we have struck a rock. So nature of the distress, what kind of boat it is, it's a sailboat, and then indicate that there's life jackets, no life raft. So that's, in the other example, there was a life raft. So now they know that there's not a life raft and that you have 12 parachute flares. So they'll be keeping an eye open for a sailboat, looking for any life jackets in the water, and keeping an eye open for any flares. So things to remember: the controlling station is always the station making the distress call unless it's been assumed by another party. So there'll be an exam questions where it says, there's a vessel in distress, and it says initially who is the controlling station. What typically happens is Coast Guard, if you're near the coast, will assume control. So, but initially the vessel that's in distress is the controlling station. So it's important that when you're making your distress call, that even though there may be chaos around you, you have to remain calm. You have to speak clearly. If nobody can, sadly, we've all heard 911 calls on TV, and people are crying and yelling, and it's not doing its purpose, right? So give your location immediately and accurately in case you lose radio contact. If you hear a distress call, you are required to offer assistance provided you do not put yourself, your crew, or your vessel in serious risk. So, you know, if you're out in the water, you hear a distress call. So I always tell people, if you hear a call, that means you're probably not that far away from it, depending on how clear it comes in. You have to decide, and that's why it's important to know, like, you know, what the nature of the distress, but it's wise if you are close, because you are required by law, we'll get into this a little bit later, to turn your vessel in the direction of the vessel in distress, even though, like, let's say there's a fire. Yeah, your boat's not equipped to handle putting out a fire on another vessel. However, you can pick up people in the water, right? So you never know if you're going to be needed or not. So if you are in somewhat close proximity and you know, you are able to offer assistance, then you are required actually to turn in direction of the vessel in distress. Listen as you're on the way, and then find out if somebody else has been able to offer assistance. See if Coast Guard's involved. So things to remember: every radio transmission in a distress communication begins with the word Mayday, not just the initial distress call. So we hear a vessel that's in distress, you know, they've done the Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And let's say I'm going to respond. So the vessel in distress is White Orchid. I'm vessel Tenacious. So I'm going to go Mayday, Orchid, Orchid, Orchid. This is Tenacious, Tenacious, Tenacious. I am in your vicinity, and so on and so forth. So again, I've started my response with the word Mayday. So if offered there's a Good Samaritan rule. It says it protects you from legal liability where you offer assistance to somebody who is in a distress situation. This is on land or off land. Before I go any further, I should say that, you know, you have a radio log that you should have. So if you hear a distress, you should write it down, even if you're not going to actually respond to it. But you know, after distress situations, you know, there's always like a review of things, especially on the water, and any relevant information like timings, who said what, when did they say it, become relevant. So it's important that you keep an accurate log, and if you are involved, it's even more important that you have an accurate log as to what you said and when you said it and what you did and so forth. So now you are required under maritime and Canadian law to respond to a vessel in distress. However, if responding is going to put your vessel in distress, your passengers and your crew in a bad situation, then you know you don't want to compound a distress situation. So as a skipper, you have to make a call. You know, what is my boat like? What kind of crew do I have? You know, what resources do I have on board? You know, what is the weather? You know, all those things. But generally, you know, it's people will respond, right? You're supposed to respond unless there's some really unusual reason why you can't. You should at least turn your vessel towards the vessel in distress. You never know, you know, what assistance you might be able to offer. You know, it may be something really simple, but if you're not there, you can't do it. So you are protected under the Good Samaritan Act from any liability arising from offering assistance. There is an exception to that, and that is that if you are acting in a rash and reckless manner. So the key there is, you know, well, you know, what does that mean? You know, I want to go and help somebody, so I don't want to be legally responsible if something doesn't work out right. So the acting rash and reckless, you know, basically is another way of saying if you are grossly negligent. So if you know, basically do something that you know is not right, you know, then you can be held responsible. So you know, like if you arrive at a fire and, you know, you start throwing oil on it to put it out, you know, like that's like crazy, right? That's grossly negligent. So that's, you know, obviously an extreme situation, but the courts lean very heavily for people who try and do the right thing, right? So it's only if there are really unusual circumstances where somebody has gone, you know, there's talking about rules of good seamanship. Well, this goes way beyond that, right? You have to be like reckless. Okay, so now we're going to respond to the distress. Upon hearing the distress call, you write down the location of the vessel in distress. You decide, are we able to offer assistance? Are we going to be okay? Our vessel crew, can we do it? If you are able to offer assistance, you alter your course towards the vessel in distress. Now you're on your way in the direction of the vessel in distress. You know, you're monitoring channel 16. You're listening to Coast Guard, see if they have any instructions. So the Coast Guard might say, any vessels in the area that could offer assistance, you know, maybe that's going to be your vessel. If you hear the distress call and Coast Guard does not respond, then at some point you may try and, you know, raise Coast Guard yourself. So that would be a Mayday relay. So, you know, White Orchid has made a distress call. You are tenacious. You don't hear anybody responding. So you determine that White Orchid is further off the coast than where you are. So you're between the coast and White Orchid. So you decide that you're going to make a Mayday relay call. So you try and raise Coast Guard, and maybe you can't get Coast Guard. Maybe you get another vessel that's closer to the shore than you are, and maybe that vessel can get Coast Guard, right? So a Mayday relay may be Mayday relay, and then, you know, Coast Guard. So if you're going to make a Mayday relay, like with everything else, you may be the only responder to the distress call. You must keep an accurate record of all events, you know, and again, do not put your passengers, crew, and vessel in jeopardy. So here's an example of a Mayday responding to a distress. So again, I start off my conversation or my transmission with the words Mayday because it's a Mayday. So I go, Mayday, White Orchid, White Orchid, White Orchid. This is tenacious, tenacious, tenacious. Received Mayday. I am 2 miles south of your location, and I will be proceeding to your location to offer assistance. My ETA is about 25 minutes. Tenacious, over. Now I'm responding, I'm headed towards the vessel in distress. But maybe I'm going to make a Mayday relay. So now I'm going to go, you know, whoever hopefully picks up this transmission. So I'm going to go Mayday relay, Mayday relay, Mayday relay. This is tenacious, tenacious, tenacious. Mayday, White Orchid. So again, I put that in there because I'm not the vessel that's having the Mayday. I'm saying it's a Mayday relay, and then I'm saying the Mayday concerns White Orchid. Then I give White Orchid's location. I don't give my location because I'm not in distress. I need vessels to go help White Orchid. So I give White Orchid's location. So that's one part of the Mayday. Then we have an ongoing Mayday. So the Coast Guard starts off the transmission, Mayday, all stations, all stations, all stations. This is Vancouver Coast Guard, Vancouver Coast Guard, Vancouver Coast Guard. Silence distress. Distress traffic in progress, stop transmitting. Vancouver Coast Guard out. That's just to clear the airways so that there can be a clean line of communication between the vessel in distress and Coast Guard or any other vessel assisting in the distress operation. Okay, so turns out that White Orchid's okay, got things fixed up, everybody's okay and it's all good. So now it's time to end the distress. So Coast Guard again goes Mayday, because everybody's still like standing by and not using the radio. All stations, all stations, all stations. This is Vancouver Coast Guard, Vancouver Coast Guard, Vancouver Coast Guard. Time 16:13:23 p. So, well, the 16 means it's the 16th day of the month, and 13:23 means it's at 13:23 on that day. And the P is for Pacific Standard Time. So we've got that all straight. And then the Coast Guard goes silence fine. Okay, so we've had a silence. Now we're having a fine, which means the silence is ended. Then the vessel White Orchid. Okay, I guess I should have. Maybe I spoke too soon. I guess White Vessel, the White Orchid sank. So, but luckily everybody was recovered and they're back home at Sydney Harbor. So the vessel White Orchid has sunk. All passengers have been recovered and are being transported to Sydney Harbor. Vancouver Coast Guard out because they don't expect to have anybody respond back. And now the channels are clear and we can commence with our normal communications. That then takes us to urgent calls. So urgent calls also made on channel 16. They take priority over all other calls except distress calls. And they relate to safety of a vessel or safety of a person where assistance is required, but where the situation is not one of grave and imminent danger. Urgent calls can be made to all stations, or they can be made to a specific station. So on land here, we have road services. On water, there are water services. And so if you are a member of one of those water services, then you may make your call directly to a water service and not to all stations. However, if you do not have a membership, then you would just make your call to all stations. Or if you are unable to reach your particular service, then again, you make your call to all stations. So what really signifies that it's an urgent call are the words pan pan, or it actually sounds as like pon pon, spoken 3 times. So here we go. Our urgent call would go like this: pon pon, pon pon, pon pon. All stations, all stations, all stations. This is White Orchid, White Orchid, White Orchid. Our position is 12 miles west of Grays Point. I'd again read off the latitude and longitude. And say we have run out of fuel and require a tow to the nearest marina. White Orchid over. Okay, so straightforward there. Then safety calls are next in priority. So the little difference with safety calls is that we start them on channel 16. We use the word sécurité, spoken 3 times. But then we move our call to channel 06, where we give our safety information. So here we are, going to make our safety call. We're on channel 16. We go sécurité, sécurité, sécurité. All stations, all stations, all stations. This is White Orchid, White Orchid, White Orchid. Safety message to follow on channel 06 regarding the area 12 miles west of Grays Point. White Orchid out. Okay, so some things here is, we say sécurité, we say all stations, so that's great. We give our vessel name. And rather than just saying, safety message to follow on channel 06 and kind of like see you later, you need to give like some information as to what area it applies to. Otherwise, if I'm out on the water and I hear that, I'm going like, I don't know if that relates to me or not. Do I have to change channels to find out if it does or doesn't? So if somebody gives me like in their safety message a heads up, okay, it's 12 miles west of Grays Point. I'm getting close to that area. I better like listen. Whereas if I'm some other area, the other side of way north of there, then I'm not going to bother going to channel 6, right? I'm just going to like stay on channel 16. So that's why it's good to give a little bit of a reference. You don't have to get latitude and longitude, just some sort of a geographic reference. It's pretty easy on the West Coast. There's always something around there. So here we go. We're on now. Now we're on channel 6. So we start over again. We go to Security. All stations. This is White Orchid. There is a deadhead floating 12 miles west of Grays Point. Latitude, I won't read it off, but there it is again. So now I've made it clear what it is, where it is. And I say this is a hazard to navigation and should be avoided. So a little bit about deadheads on the West Coast. They're all over the place. Some are like branches, some are not, and so just because you see a little piece of a branch go by, you don't want to be making a safety call. You'd be on there all day. So you have to figure out, is it something that is serious enough that should be considered for other vessels, So one time I thought I saw a turtle, out in the water, and what it was a half submerged log. And if anybody hit that, there'd be a major problem, right? So, and then I've seen lots of little branches that, my boat may not like it too much, but it's not going to like put a hole in the side, right? So you have to make an assessment of what it is. Fishing net adrift, that's a problem, right? So, or barrels or containers floating around, those are serious things. So anyway, you've told what the hazard is, and it's a hazard of navigation, and you go White Orchid out. So, you could just go back to channel 16, but maybe somebody has a question. So it might be a good idea just to wait around for a little bit and see if anybody does have a question. One of the exam questions happens to be like you hear a safety call, and after you've heard the message, who do you contact to get more information about it? Do you contact, the Coast Guard, there's a couple of choices, or do you contact the vessel that made the call? Well, the answer is you contact the vessel that made the call. They know what they saw, where they saw it, and so forth, right? So that's why it's important to stick around for a little bit. And then if nobody calls you back, then you go back to channel 16 and continue on. Okay, now we're going to move into another sort of phase here, and that is the global maritime distress and safety system. So I've written that out like that because once you know, the exam asks you, what does GMDSS stand for? So you might get, you have options, right? So this is the correct option, but you might get Global Marine Distress Security System, or you might get Global Marine Distress, system safety. I don't know. It's just that they mix it up, right? So you have to know that this is the correct one. What does all that mean? Well, here's sort of like a overlay of how it all works. So in the middle there, we've got a vessel going down, and he's triggered his DSC distress signal, and that signal will go to any shore station if they're in range, any other vessels that are in range, and that'll be one way of getting a distress signal up. Then he also has an Eeper on board. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But that's triggered. So our radio signal goes horizontal. Our Eeper signal goes up to a satellite, a COSPAS SARSAT satellite. And why do we care that it's a COSPAS SARSAT satellite? Because the exam asks you what is the name of the satellite. So you need to know that. Then the satellite transmits to a receiver station on shore, and then that station is either a search and rescue, or they contact search and rescue, or Coast Guard, and the process begins to send you help. So for pleasure craft, our biggest asset is having a DSC, VHF, or a medium frequency radio that is connected to GPS or a LORAN system. So it used to be, so you have to be careful when you buy a used boat that has a radio. It may have a DSC function in it, but if it's coming out of the US, especially, in the old days, you had a DSC radio that was not actually connected to any GPS. So that's not legal up here. It has to be either built in, which most are now, built-in GPS, or the ability to connect to another navigation system so that when it transmits your distress, it also transmits your location. So the top two are kind of together. That's the most important thing, and literally almost the least expensive. I mean, obviously radios, you can go way up high with those, but next in line is the Eeper. So the Eeper, as we saw, triggers a signal, goes up to a satellite and then to a shore. Then there is the SART, which we'll talk about later too, but it's a search and rescue transponder. And then the nav text is a weather fax. So it'll give you weather information. You can also get navigation information on there too. Okay, so DSC, digital selective calling. It's only on channel 70, which is a digital channel, no voice communication. In fact, if you turn your radio on, you cannot even find channel 70, right? Because it's a separate part of your radio function. You don't really have ability to access it. But you need to know what DSC stands for. So there it is. So, like I say, it's exclusive to channel 70, no voice. So all DSC radios require a unique MMSI number. Now, we call it a MMC number because that's a lot easier to say. But it stands for, and you need to know this, Maritime Mobile Service Identification. Now, you might get on the exam Marine Mobile Safety Identification, or, but it's Maritime Mobile Service Identification. And I always equate this to like your cell phone number. It's distinctive to your phone. And if I want to call you, I need to know your telephone number. So the MMC number consists of 9 digits. The first 3 identify the user. So there's differences between Canada and the US and Coast Guard. And there's also, you can get fleet numbers, like the Power Squadron has a fleet number if you're in a fleet. So it just helps you identify, where the call is somewhat coming from. So MMC numbers are easy to obtain through Industry Canada. You just simply fill out an application. I've got here, there's an office in Calgary. I'm in Alberta, so that's why I say that. But there's offices in, I'm not sure about Saskatchewan, but if there's not one in your province, it's not a big deal. You can actually do a lot of it online nowadays, so it's really simple. But what you do is, of course, you have to pay a little bit to get your MMC number, but you only pay once, so that's good. And then what you do is you provide your name, your contact information, your radio make, serial number, the vessel description, and vessel use. So sailboat, maybe powerboat, maybe a fishing boat, and third-party contact information in the event of an emergency. So again, you might buy a radio that already has a MMC number in it. So you go, oh, that's great. I don't really need to do it. If I buy a radio out of the States that has a MMC number, it's like, I got my MMC number. Problem is that MMC number was issued by the FCC in the US. Not going to be good up here. So you have to go to Industry Canada anyway and get a new MMC number. Then the next problem is that, they don't want it, so you just keep switching MMC numbers around. So once you have it in your radio, it's pretty much locked there. So you're gonna have to get somebody who is a, professional in the area to basically unlock your radio so that you can enter a new MMC number. And it may actually require the radio go back to the manufacturer, unless there's a service in the area that, that can do that for you. Okay, so your DSC radio will allow you to send out a distress signal on channel 70 simply by pushing one button and holding it for 4 or 5 seconds. Great thing about that is you can have young kids on board, 4 or 5-year-old kids, and say, look, if you see anybody on the boat or see the boat's in trouble, you come over and you do this. So they takes no, special skills to hold a button for 4 or 5 seconds. That distress signal goes out. It's interfaced with your GPS, or maybe you have LORAN interface with it. It'll provide your location, your name, your contact information, and description of your vessel, along with your MIMC number. So any DCS radio within the range will receive your call, which is a very distinctive warbling noise. You will not hear any other noise like it on your boat. You can't mistake it for an oven timer or, your chart plotter making a noise. No, it is very distinctive. Now, the key is you do not respond on channel 70 if you hear a distress call by DSC, because the effect of that will be is you will cancel that distress call. So what you could do is you could mute your radio, so you're no longer hearing the warbling, but then on channel 16, listen, decide if you're going to be able to offer help or just listen to what's going on, and so that you can stay clear or offer help or whatever the situation might be. So let's talk about, is the Coast Guard going to continue to monitor channel 16? Because commercial vessels no longer have to. So, but they do for the most part, especially in coastal waters. But offshore, you may have trouble trying to hail a commercial vessel by channel 16. But, you might be able to get one by your DSC radio because they have to monitor that. It's a different thing. So if you're in trouble, don't worry. You still have the DSC radio function, which will put you in touch with commercial vessels if they're in your area. But Coast Guard for the foreseeable future, and I don't really know how that will ever end because radios are not changing. People need channel 16, so Coast Guard will continue to monitor channel 16 for the foreseeable future. Always follow up your distress call with an oral mayday. Like I say, not everybody has a DSC call, or maybe not everybody is within your range, that has a DSC call. So always follow up by an oral call. You can have a vessel, it's a mile from you, and they do not know you're in distress because they don't have a DSC radio. So okay, so if the Coast Guard does not respond, and no other vessel has responded to a distress, then you can attempt to reach the Coast Guard or on channel 16. So you send out your distress, no response back. So now you try and reach the Coast Guard. So I sort of said this before, but with the advent of the DSC radio, commercial vessels are no longer required to monitor channel 16, but they are required to monitor channel 70. So hopefully, one or the other, you'll get somebody. The DSC radio also allows you to make urgent calls. So again, if you're out there and commercial vessels are in the area but not monitoring channel 16, you can probably get them anyway by DSC radio on an urgent or a safety call. Okay, now let's say you want to use your DSC function, but you don't have a distress, you don't have an urgent, you don't have a safety message to make, but you want to contact your friend. So you have your friend's MIMC number, which, like I say, is like a cell phone number. So you can enter that into your DSC radio. You actually have contacts on your DSC radio. So you can bring up your friend Bob there, and his MIMC is already stored on your radio, and then you can send DSC off to Bob. Bob will get a beep, beep, beep. Bob knows you and has you in his contacts, just like your phone. Say, hey, it's Les calling. Les is calling you. So, oh, good. Well, then we can pick a channel and have a conversation. So it takes us off of channel 16. That's the other advantage of a DSC radio. Okay, now this is kind of like outside the course, but good to know, right? If you're looking for radios, think, oh, you know, what should I be looking for radio? Well, so a VHF radio has limitations. The big one is range, right? It doesn't have a super range. Medium frequency, bigger range, bigger watts, you know. It's like buying the stereo, right? The bigger watts. And so the thing is that you can also have medium frequency radios that have sideband. So this diagram here is like, okay, when we have our VHF radio, it's kind of like it has the carrier signal and it has the upper and lower sidebands, but it's our 25 watts is pushing all those waves. If we have a single sideband, then that means we either have an upper or lower band that takes out the carrier in one of the other bands. So all of our power is focused behind one. If you notice, the carrier is a straight line. The other two are wavy, right? So they go up and down, up and down. It gives us more of a range. So they bounce up and down, up and down, up and down. So on a medium frequency radio, you can get single sideband, and some of those channels on sideband actually overlap the ham radio frequencies. So you can actually speak to people on ham radio without having a ham radio. So it's great. So, you know, I've spoken to people gone across to Hawaii, and they've had radio communication pretty much all the way across, right? To people on ham radios and stuff. So it really increases range. Plus, having that ability allows you to get weather faxes should you choose, or you can link into the internet with a couple of adapters. So it just makes you more connected. So here we have like the high frequency range. So it's like a short wave, like a ham radio on the sideband, 8 times stronger than standard, you know, mode. And the radio, you know, is 150 plus watts, right? So it's really pumping it out there. And it's tuned by frequency, not by channel. The only radio tuned by channel is the VHF radio. Everybody else is on tuning to a specific frequency. So the signal bounces out of the atmosphere, creating tremendous range. And that's not already mentioned, but you use a modem, get email, internet, weather faxes. You know, prices start around $1,500. It's probably gone up since I wrote that, but you know, it just depends, right? What you're looking for. Next thing is the Eeper. So I always look at this and go like it's like a Tonka toy walkie-talkie, you know, that yellow, but it's not. It's a very important device to have. And again, I've written out emergency position identification radio beacon because you'll probably need to know that. And how it works is it sends out a signal that, as we saw earlier, goes up to the COSPAS SARSAT satellite, which is relayed to the ground. And then the ground contacts the appropriate authority to say, hey, we got a distress signal here. And this is who it is, this is where they are. So like your radio, you have to register your Eeper with Industry Canada. Same information, right? So, to know what kind of vessel you're on, who you are, who to contact, things like that. There's 2 types of Eeper. So one will start transmitting a distress signal once it's released from its brackets. The other one, and it will automatically release from its brackets when it's immersed in water. So the only key there is you have to make sure that if it gets released from its brackets, it's going to float to the surface. So you can't have it in your, you know, your forward head and hope that it's going to help you, right? It's not. It's got to be where it's going to float out up to the surface and start to transmit. The other one is class 2, which is a manually activated, although some will trigger automatically if submerged in water. So both function the same range. It's just how are they triggered. So just go back a bit here. So the thing is that when do I need an Eeper? Well, they are expensive, but you know, they definitely do the job. So even if you're a coastal traveler, I mean, there's areas of the coast that are pretty isolated, and you know, your radio signal with the landscape and such, it may not be much help. So if you're going to go any distance, Eeper is great. Likewise, if you're going to be outside of area 1, A1, with your radio, meaning that you have no more communication with a shore-based station, then again, you're more isolated. So you need to have something more to cut that isolation, and this would do it for sure. Okay, next thing is the SART, Search and Rescue Transponder. So it works differently than the EPIRB. So the EPIRB sends a signal to a satellite. What this guy does is you put it on, you know, this is more of a device for, you know, like, I'd say like a life raft kind of thing, but you know, not necessarily, but definitely, you know, it'd be handy to have in a life raft for sure. So how it works is you turn it on, it goes into sleeper mode. And it does that to preserve battery life. Then it's triggered when it picks up radar. So radar from another vessel or planes may be searching for you. Then it comes to life and goes, hey, I felt a radar signal there. So it starts emitting a little beep. And that beep is picked up by other vessel or plane radar. So now it puts you on their screen. It doesn't send any message. You're just like a little beep. However, it says where you are, right? Which is the big thing. So here's an example of kind of how it goes. And this is not on your exam, but it's just good to know sort of how it functions. So, you know, you start off, you have like a little dot, and then it gets a little bit bigger as you get closer. And then the circles get tighter as you're honing in on where it's actually located. So it's a great thing to have, you know, so keep that in mind as well. So that's basically my presentation for the exam. Now, there's other things that I send you, which will also help you prepare for the exam. But there's another part to the exam, which is the oral section. So what I would do there is I have you spell a few words with the phonetic alphabet. And then I give you different scenarios. And then you tell me if it's a distress, mayday, distress, urgent, or or safety call. And then I have you make the call. You tell me what channel you'd be on. And then like I said earlier, I'm watching for certain information. So just going ahead here. Oh, I guess I haven't covered this. So I'll just do this too. So another you can now get with your radios, if you choose, is an automatic identification system. This is not on your exam either, but it's good to know. So it's used to locate and identify nearby vessels for a collision. So most commercial vessels will now have this. Most pleasure craft probably don't. It uses VHF radio signals to transmit radio information. So there's two types. There's the A for commercial and the B for pleasure. And this gives you an idea. You can actually, I got this online. You can go online and you can follow cruise ships around the world. But it shows you what vessels out there, and then most times it'll give you a photo and a description of what they look of what it is and what they do. And so if you don't have radar, this is one thing that can help you. Anyway, puts you on the map, puts the other vessels on the map, so it gives you more visibility in both respects. Okay. So I mentioned, give you some examples. So here we are. And you'd have to decide what kind of call this is. So there we are. We have a boat name. We have a Bavaria, which is a sailboat. And a little bit about what we look like and the length and where we are. It should be 49 degrees and 122 degrees. Okay, so it says you are sailing in Hull Sound, just off the entrance to Snug Cove, and you see a fishing net. And what do we do? Well, see, not in grave and imminent danger. I don't need a tow or parts or fuel. But I bet you that's a hazard. So that's a safety call. So then I would, go to channel 16, the security, and then my message to follow on channel 06. So that would be that one. Of course, I really shortened that up, but that's what I'd be looking for. Now we have another one. Different boat name. Hunter is also a sailboat. And it's got, black bimini, so that's something a little bit different about it, maybe. And we're in Howell Sound. We're 4 nautical miles east of Salamanca Point on Galiana when oil fire breaks out in the galley. Despite our best efforts, you're having trouble containing the fire. Boy, fire, that's not good. That would be a distress call. So we would need to make a distress call. So I need you to be able to, again, have the mayday, 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 tenacious, 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 mayday, tenacious, and where you are and so forth. So then we have one here. So this one's got a little bit more of a, wonder what that is. So we have our boat. It's a Sun Odyssey, another sailboat. Gives us our position, the length. And the boat was demasted after a short but severe storms. That doesn't sound very good. But wait a minute, we don't have any steerage because we lost our rudder. That doesn't sound very good either. But we don't have any injuries on board. The motor still runs and all of the electrical systems are working. And we have 12 daylight and 12 nighttime flares, and you're about 6 nautical miles off shore near south of Point Roberts. So, is there a grave and imminent danger there? Well, we don't have anybody injured. Granted, we don't have steerage, but we're not too close to the shore. We do have all of our electrical systems, so that means we're able to communicate. We probably let Coast Guard know. So what this would be is an urgent call because we need assistance, right? And then we'd probably, on top of that, make a safety call because we're a hazard out there. We don't have control of our vessel. And we're a vessel not in control, is what they say. And so we would need to notify Coast Guard where we are. So Coast Guard can notify commercial vessels in the area. We might be in a shipping lane, right? Still not necessarily grave and imminent. We want to make ourselves visible. So we have flares. We can do that if we see a vessel approaching. And we have our radio still. And we have our motor. So, we may not be able to steer, but, maybe we can jury rig some sort of a rudder and at least have enough sort of maneuverability to get ourselves out of the way of things. So that one would be an urgent call. So anyway, it's been a pleasure presenting this, and look forward to giving your exams when you have a chance. So hope this was helpful. Bye for now.